Members of City Council, please attend a call meeting of the City Council to be held in City Council Chamber, 801 Crawford Street, 6 p.m., Monday, November 25th, 2013, for the purpose of a public work session. In addition, you may consider a motion to go into closed meeting by order of the mayor. Members of council, if you would please indicate your presence electronically. 7 members of City Council are present. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Tonight's appeal is of Wayne Davis seeks to appeal the Historic Preservation Commission decision to deny his request to replace fiberboard siding with vinyl siding at Worthington Square. The role of City Council this evening is to hear the appeal and either reverse or affirm the decision of the Historic Preservation Commission based on an error in findings. Our order of speakers will be the applicant first, a representative of the HPC second. Each speaker will have up to 10 minutes to speak. When you hear the timer go off, we ask that you please conclude your remarks at that time. At this time, we will have the applicant, Mr. Davis, or his representative to please come forward.
Well, good evening, everyone.
Good evening, sir. How are you?
Good, thank you. Honorable Mayor, Vice Mayor, and City Council members, thank you for the opportunity to be here. As indicated, my name is Wayne Davis. I'm the president of our Worthington Square Condominium Association here in Portsmouth. Other members of our board are here also. Val Jacks, our secretary, and Dan Peterson, our treasurer, also here representing our community. We're here to appeal a decision by the Portsmouth Historic Preservation Commission rendered on July 17th, denying our request to replace our masonite siding with vinyl siding and to wrap our exterior wood trim in aluminum. As you may know, masonite and other similar fiberboard products have been the subject of multiple class action lawsuits over the years. Unfortunately, the window of opportunity for us to participate in those lawsuits is long past. Now, before I continue, let me tell you this. This initiative to identify vinyl as a possible solution to our siding problems and to wrap our trim in aluminum has been undertaken by our board of directors. Certainly, we're aware that a couple of people in our community aren't in favor of that approach at this time. Our objective is to gain approval, and then if that's a possibility, we'll build our business case analysis, develop alternatives, figure out the cost benefit, and make that decision available to our owners who'll decide what to do. It's not something that the board can do, but we do need your approval to make that an option. I'll continue. We're proposing this action in order to address the many long-term and continuing problems which have resulted from the failure of fiberboard siding. This is still the original siding installed in our units when they were built in 1982. The fiberboard material is very susceptible to water intrusion and delamination. Further, it does not hold paint very well and results in a less than satisfactory appearance shortly after being newly painted. Now, I've included some photos of the type of failure. You'll see that on the second or third page, the type of failure that occurs. And so you can see the delamination problem that we've been facing. Our community is small, and I'm not sure how many people realize this. We're only 6 residential buildings with 18 small sheds. Less than 10% of what are primarily brick residential buildings are covered in fiberboard siding. The sheds are located to the side or rear of our residential buildings and are not easily seen from the street. The last picture in the package I presented shows the types of applications of the fiberboard siding in our community, and you can see from the center picture that we are largely brick exterior buildings, but we've had a lot of problems with our fiberboard siding. The color of the vinyl and aluminum materials that we propose would be virtually identical to our current color. When the project is complete, the units will look just as they do today, except that they'll no longer be water-damaged masonite showing in places, which we have today. The exterior of our entire development will have a well-maintained appearance long into the future, as opposed to our current ongoing building-by-building, scrape, replace as needed, and paint cycles. The result of which is that there are some areas, siding or wood trim, always in need of repair and paint. We have a typical example of a type of smooth vinyl siding proposed to be used. This material Here's the sample. This material shows the beaded form that we use today. That's our current fiberboard siding. Same form. We assert that the Old Town Historic District guidelines are, quote, guidelines by definition, and therefore should be subject to some modest interpretation. This is particularly relevant given the many existing applications of vinyl siding and aluminum wrap trim that exist in Old Town. Based on an analysis of the city assessor's database, there are actually 98 vinyl-sided properties in the Old Town Historic District today. 98. I suspect there are a similar number of aluminum-sided buildings in the Historic District as well. These buildings have aluminum-wrapped trim as well as the siding. For reference, it's noted that the duplex at 356-358 Court Street has vinyl siding virtually identical to the siding that we propose to use. Another duplex at 527-529 Glasgow Street has very similar vinyl siding. There are 3 condominium properties on the border of Old Town with 100% vinyl siding and aluminum-covered trim. 2 of these are directly across Washington Street from our community. You could throw a stone over there. And the others directly across London Street at Middle. At our July hearing, the HPC refused to consider any guideline interpretation. Instead, the HPC insisted that it had absolutely no option whatsoever to consider our petition, in spite of the fact that there are so many structures within Old Town with both vinyl siding and aluminum wrap on exterior trim. Our condominiums were built in 1982. As such, our community is considered a non-contributing development. HPC commissioners introduced this term during our hearing back earlier in the year. By the definition provided at that hearing, the term means that our community is not an authentic historic property and contributes little of a historic nature. When our condominiums were constructed, they were not actually included in or defined as a part of Old Town. We believe that to now enforce a rigorous application of guidelines developed a mere 5 years ago that were intended for truly historic buildings to a non-contributing structure built in 1982 is on its face seems to be unreasonable. We ask you to reverse the HPC decision and grant our request to cover our wood trim in aluminum and replace our fiberboard siding with vinyl. At our HPC hearing, city planning staff in attendance suggested that plans for Worthington Square new construction had been reviewed and approved prior to original construction and stated that the project was therefore locked in as approved and no change could be made. At our request, HPC staff conducted additional research after the hearing and could find no record that the plans and specs for our development were ever submitted for approval or approved by the HPC. The Commission of Architectural Review was the predecessor of HPC, since HPC wasn't created until about 2008. The CAR minutes of December 4th, 1980 show that a totally voluntary presentation of plans for our development was made by Dan Griffin, one of the developers and architects. In conclusion, we believe that HPC erred in failing to consider the many factors related to our petition and to render a fair and equitable decision. The fact that we have been granted this hearing with you tonight is a testament to that. We respectfully submit that guidelines are not commandments and request that you reverse the decision by the HPC. Thank you.
Mr. Tony Goodwin will come up to represent the HPC.
Good evening. My name is Tony Goodwin, of course, and sit as your chairman to the Historic Preservation Commission. And, of course, to this case that we, of course, heard in July, it was based upon the items that we were following in the guidelines, solely to not approve any type of vinyl coverings for any structures, not only in Old Town, but also in Parkview and in Port Norfolk. Those guidelines were adopted, of course, in 2008, and we follow those to the core. Those are the guidelines that were approved by this body for us to follow, and so we're doing that as to the best of our ability. Also, to the point of we encourage all applicants, or at least acknowledge that all applicants have reviewed the guidelines prior to each meeting And we also encourage everyone that is at this meeting tonight have reviewed those guidelines as the same that we are set to go by. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Mr. Goodwin, how do you explain the 90-some structures in Old Town that have some form of vinyl or other siding on them?
Prior to these guidelines that were adopted in 2008, again, we do not allow vinyl siding based on these guidelines and the matrix that we have to follow. New construction, existing structures, or what else? What happened prior to 2008, the guidelines were revised, I believe, twice, once in '89 and again back when the district was originally formed. Some of the siding on some of those structures probably date back prior to even the first set of guidelines that were adopted.
How about also imposing historic guidelines on a 31-year-old development?
Again, if a property came in to build today, they would not be allowed to put vinyl siding on.
Okay.
This may be, I'm not sure if this is a question for Mr. Goodwin or Mr. Davis. I'm very familiar with Worthington Square. I was one of the original owners there for the first 8 years it was built. If they replace, because it's a condominium complex, what is done for one would be done for all, correct?
To my knowledge, if they do repair in kind, which the product obviously that they have there now most likely would not be replaceable, but in the meantime, it would be to the benefit of having all of them done the same way.
Once HPC approves product X, then, Mr. Davis, it would be your condominium board's decision to tell all owners they can redo with product X. Is that right?
Our exterior of our properties are owned by the association. It's a common element. So if it's done, all of our owners would be a party to it. We would do them all.
Mr. Davis, I'm sorry, could you go to the mic, please?
In other words, like all the little storage units that are behind where you live that are very visible along
Yes.
Crawford Parkway.
Yeah.
They'd all be done at one time and all in the same fashion.
That's correct. It would be part of one project. Yes, ma'am.
And Mr. Goodwin, according to your HPC guidelines, that board, for lack of a better term, can only be replaced with a similar project, a similar product.
What is evident to us is that products that are replaced in kind do not need approval. Vinyl is in no way allowed in the district.
Right.
Mr. Chair. Thank you. So what are the products that can be replaced with? I mean, did you guys you have recommendations, or does it have to be the exact same thing?
As my memory recalls, products that can be used in the district with his HPC approval is cementitious or what they call a fiberboard, wood siding material. Again, that can be used to be replaced rather than vinyl.
Is that when you say wood? Is that like hardy plank kind of?
Hardy plank is a cementitious siding. Sure. It's just a brand name. The other is a fiber wood product that, in all intents and purposes, is wood, but is manufactured.
Okay, so they could use hardy plank.
Yes, and when we have made suggestions to that effect, on a case-by-case basis, when someone does come in to request to replace even wood siding deteriorated beyond its repair, to consider that wood siding product. Again, the name escapes me. Smart siding, actually, it is, and to the brand name is Hardy Plank is a cementitious siding.
Thank you.
Okay. Another question? Okay. Madam Clerk.
May I make a comment on that?
Sure. Yes, sir. Be brief.
That was recommended or suggested at our hearing, and we spoke with a contractor and got a rough order of magnitude estimate for using hardy plank. Based on that, it looks like it would be at least 2 times as expensive and probably 3 because of the labor, the individual boards, the way hardy plank is put together. It'd be pretty much out of the ballpark from a financial perspective. So that's the research we've done so far. Thank you.
Council members, at this time is your opportunity for discussion. If you have no further discussion, you have one of 2 motions to make, either to affirm the decision of the HPC or to reverse it. 2. Motion by Councilwoman Simmons and second by Councilman Meeks to affirm the decision of the HPC. If you will vote electronically following
Mr. Moody?
Councilman.
I think the thing here is these are guidelines. And I guarantee you, if you held up a piece of hardy plank in the back of that room and vinyl siding outside the light, you wouldn't be able to tell the difference. And what we're imposing on citizens is still fiberboard is not a historic product, neither is hardy board. What is significant is that the fiberboard in a year or a few years, depending on the weather, is going to look deplorable. And it comes down to, I think, to common sense. Do you want something on housing stock in this area that you say, well, that was approved, even though it's buckling and puckering and falling off, yet it's fiberboard is a historic material. That's not common sense, I don't think. And I'm all for preserving our historic stock, but this community was built in 1981. So it's not historic stock. Anybody riding down the road knows it's not. So we're trying to impose something, historic guidelines on a historic non-historic development, which I think is ludicrous. So I won't, in this case, I won't vote to uphold it, and that's unusual for me. If it was the historic stock we were talking about, I would, but makes no sense whatsoever.
Okay. Mr. Meeks?
Thank you, Mayor. I'm trying to figure out how many people in your residence are on board with this change and how many is not?
We've not taken a poll. I can name 3 people who have reservations. Their concerns have been, is this going to happen without their participation? And the answer to that is no. We're trying to get the opportunity to wrap our trim in aluminum and replace this deteriorating fiberboard. And as I said earlier, we would develop a business case analysis, figure out the pros and cons from a financial perspective, get everyone's input, and our owners will decide what to do about this.
Are their reserve, is it because of the cost? It might cost the monthly fees to them, or what's their hesitation?
I think that, well, I can't say. I don't really know. I think some people have a bad impression of vinyl siding. We've seen bad vinyl siding in the past, the kind we propose to use, that, again, on that duplex on Court Street looks terrific, and it's just exactly what we're proposing. So I think our few owners who have expressed concern to me don't have the full picture. Now, their objections may survive, our best effort to explain the finances and the quality of this material that the high quality of the material that we'd select or that we'd propose to use, in which case it'll come down to what the owners decide.
All right, thank you.
Okay, but it is a 2-part thing. We'd like to cover our trim with aluminum, and that should have no effect on the historical architectural nature. And and, of course, replace this defective fiberboard siding. Thank you.
Ms. Simmons?
Thank you, Mayor. I'd just like to remind my colleagues that the point of this appeal is not whether we agree or disagree with party plank versus vinyl versus styrofoam or drive it or anything else. It's did HPC find an error or not? That's what we're here to decide. If we want to change the HPC regulations, that's another meeting, but that's not what this meeting is about. Am I wrong, Mr. Wilson?
You're correct, Ms. Simmons.
Mr. Moody?
What's and maybe my question is to Mr. Wilson, what's the difference between a guideline and a regulation?
Yes,
Well,
sir.
For instance, a guideline for an organization such as the Historic Preservation Commission is to provide guidelines for the citizens in order for them to know what's expected of them. But it's also to provide guidelines for the commission so that they don't act in an arbitrary and capricious fashion. In other words, that they don't say this color is fine today, and the next day they have a change of heart because the light's different in the room. It's to provide certainty to the process.
As opposed to a regulation?
Well, I think that in this case, it's pretty much the same thing. The guidelines are set up to provide the predictability that regulations provide. That's the whole object here, is to provide predictability and certainty in the process and fairness in the process so that everyone knows what's expected of them when they bring it before the commission, and what's expected of them and how the commission will rule. And it's not a matter of sympathy, it's a matter of certainty.
Okay, we got a motion and a second. Everybody please vote.
This item has been approved 5-2, and that's to affirm the HPC ruling. Members of council, you have before you a motion for closed meeting. If someone could make the motion, please.
I move to go into a closed meeting pursuant to the provisions of Virginia Code Section 2.2-3711 for the following purpose. Candidates for appointment to city boards and commissions as permitted under subsection A1.
A second.
We have a motion and a second, and you'll be voting electronically. We are in closed session by 7:0. Thank you.